Hi beautiful people. So this video might be a little early. I know that prom is normally like May, April-ish time, but a lot of people recently have been asking me to make a video about this, about prom and stuff. And so I was like, why not just make it now so that people can have it to think about, like this video to think about, and then when it comes they'll know like, okay, I think I want to go or I think I don't want to go. So I thought, why not just make it now because of that. So I want to just talk about prom today. I'm not just going to be doing a should Christians go to prom video, because I know a lot of Christians approach different topics that way because we all want an easy yes or no answer. We want it to be black and white, but this is one of those things, you know, it's not in the Bible about whether or not we should go to prom. So you kind of have to figure out between you and God, is this something I feel that I should do between you and him? So I want you to think about it for yourself. Should I go to prom? Should I not go to prom? I'm going to just be talking about my thoughts on it and about how I did go to prom when I was in high school. So I hope that this kind of just conversation between you and me is not like a preaching type of thing, but more like a conversation just between us, as if you were a little sister of mine or something. So yeah. All right, getting into the actual video now. So I graduated high school in 2014, and over those 4 years now I was there, we had a ton of opportunities to go to dances. So it was like fall, every fall we had homecoming, every spring we had vice versa, which is where the girl asked the guy to the dance. And then my junior year and senior year we could go to prom, which was like exclusively for juniors and seniors. So yeah, over those 4 years I had a lot of chances to go to these dances. I think there was 10 total that I could have gone to when I was in high school. I think I went to all of them except for maybe 2. So I kind of just want to talk about why I went and yeah, just my intentions behind going, because I know some Christians have the conviction that they, you know, shouldn't go to prom specifically, or maybe homecoming, whatever it's called in at your high school, whatever. I know a lot of people have convictions against that. So I kind of want to talk about why I went and what went on when I was there. So I usually went with a guy, a guy friend, or if I was dating someone at the time, I went with my boyfriend. And so we would go together, and then if I didn't get a date, I would go with a group of girlfriends, which was really fun actually. And if this is just a side note that I think is super important to say, if you don't get asked to a dance and you think that there's something wrong with you for that, there's nothing wrong with you. And actually, it's really fun to go with a group of girlfriends. Like I went, I know for sure my senior year prom, it was super fun. Like I had a really good time. And so if you don't get asked to a dance, like there's nothing wrong with you, don't think that. I didn't always get asked either. So just a side note, that's super important side note. So yeah, side note done. I'll actually see if I can throw in a little montage right here of my high school dances really fast for you.
I hope you had the time of your life.
So there you have it. Yeah, I did go. I did have a lot of fun. We were there. Those like pictures bring back some good memories with my friends and everything. We just had a really good time going. But I will say this, I had certain boundaries set up in place for me and like whoever I was going with, whether it was my guy friends or my group of girlfriends, I had like certain boundaries put into place before we went, just because of the convictions that I have as a Christian. I didn't want to like get there or even at the after party and make decisions that I knew that God would not want me to make, or that weren't like wise for me to make decisions to make. So I'll talk about those too. So for example, and this is, I feel awkward talking about this, but there was this thing that we called at my high school grinding. And I don't know if that's a universal term for like everywhere around the world, or if it was just in my area, like in high school where I grew up. But everyone did what was called grinding. A lot of people did grinding, and it was just basically just something that I felt that was not something that as a Christian like I should be doing. It just felt like too much of, or it felt too close to something that I told God that I would save for my husband for when I'm married, you know? And so I never did that. And going into the dances, every dance, you know, I knew for myself I wasn't gonna do it, and I knew, like I told my date in advance, I'm not gonna be doing that, and he was okay with that every time. If that person hadn't been okay with it, I probably wouldn't have gone with them, you know what I mean? So that was set in place before I went, just because I did not want to fall into that temptation to do what everyone else was kind of doing there, you know? Another thing I had always like planned in advance, and this is not just for dances, but a lot of times like after dances people go out and party and stuff, and like just in general between me and God, I always said like I wouldn't party, I wouldn't go to that kind of place just because it was way too tempting to do stuff that not only was illegal but that I just felt very convicted against doing. And so for the after parties I would always have something planned for us to do, like go to a friend's house to watch a movie, or I don't know, just go hang out and talk and have stacks and whatnot. Like it sounds boring, but it's actually really fun if you have a group of fun people. And so that was always fun afterwards, you know, because a lot of people did go and do stuff and party and whatnot, and like I'm not judging anyone for doing that kind of stuff, but for me that's just not something that I wanted to do, to take part in, and so I didn't. But it could be easy to do if you don't have it planned out in advance, like in your head and between you and God, that you weren't going to. So I had kind of written down, like, I will not do this, I will not do this. And I kind of, I don't know, I made sure that I had it written down and had it between me and God in advance so that when it came down to it, that I wouldn't fall into that. I know I keep repeating myself, but it's just, I'm trying to process this out loud, I guess. So yeah, I mean, it was just a fun night with friends. It was nothing that, looking back, I see myself having these impure motives and bad intentions with guys and whatnot. Like, I had certain things set in place so that I wouldn't be tempted to go, you know, and do things that I didn't want to do and that God wouldn't want me to do, whatever. But I'll say this, even though I went and I, you know, felt like it was okay to go, it might not be the same for you. You might feel convicted against going because maybe you don't have a group of good Christian friends who will, you know, hold you accountable, who will push you to do good rather than bad, whatever. You might not have that group of friends to hang out with afterwards or during the dance, whatnot. So don't feel like just because I went that you have to too. I think that's something between you and God that you kind of have to figure out for yourself. So there you have it, my perspective on prom. I hope that this encouraged you to not just think about things like legalistically where it's always yes or no or, you know, right or wrong, whatever. I hope that it's encouraged you to take things that aren't in the Bible and talk to God about it. Talk to people in your life who maybe have been in that situation before, what they did about it, and then kind of take some time to step back, think about, pray about if this is something that you should do or not. You know, not just about prom, but about a lot of other things too. Because we face a lot of different things now that were not even, not real, but things that weren't around during the Bible times are here now that we have to deal with. And so I hope that this encourages you to take time to think about that stuff between you and God. And I also hope, and this is a big hope, that the Christians watching this who completely disagree with my decision to go, I pray and beg you, please be kind in the comments, not only to myself, but to the other people who may agree with me. You know, because I have seen in my time as a YouTuber some of the cruelest comments that I can get and that are replies to other Christians in the comments have been some of the cruelest ones that I've ever seen. Not even the people who hate Jesus and hate everything about religion and whatnot. They are not always the meanest. The people that I've seen who can be the cruelest are the people who claim to be Christ followers. So with that in mind, please be kind to not only myself, but the other people in the comments as well. We should be the ones quickest to give love and to give grace rather than to condemn. So please keep that in mind, not only for this video, but for all videos in the future, not only on my channel, but all across the board, okay? Because when it comes down to it, honestly, we are on the same team. So let's love like it. Have a great day and know that you are so loved and so beautiful.
Well, welcome again to another episode of Christian Answers. My name is Pastor Jeff Short, and today we're going to be talking about something that rolls around every time of the year in the springtime. It is the experience or activity of high school students of what is called spring prom, or the end of the year prom. It's a big dance that the school throws. And especially for seniors, it's the last social activity of the year, not only of the year, but of their entire class or of their entire high school career or school career, local school career. So this is a big deal for a lot of high school students. Unfortunately, the whole concept of prom has become something that has been corrupted, almost unrecognizable as simply a going away dance or the end of the year dance or end of the school career dance. It's gone way beyond anything that any reasonable person would have ever understood it to be. When I was in high school decades ago, I attended the senior prom, and it basically was an event where high school seniors would dress up fancy, guys would in tuxedos, and girls would get fancy dresses, although not as fancy as and expensive as today. We'll talk more about that later, but it was a place where these high school kids could act like they're grown up, and they could have a final social activity of the whole school experience. And that was it. And then afterwards, that's all over, and you see each other once in a while, maybe in college, around town, but that's the end of your school career. Well, today, the prom has become something almost akin to a wedding. And in fact, I was reading some articles online, and one article described the prom for people in the inner city, quote, inner city. The prom has taken the place of marriage or a wedding. And it has taken on this monumental, huge, fancy, expensive, lavish event that is supposed to be reserved for something like a wedding. And supposedly this article is describing for a lot of people in the inner city who don't get married, who don't experience a wedding ever. They just live together with their boyfriends and girlfriends. That the prom at the end of the senior year is taking the place of the wedding ceremony in many lives of people in the, quote, inner city. That's what this article said. But we have to look at what the prom has become. Now, as Christians, from a biblical Christian perspective, there are many different ways we could tackle this issue. Now, the first thing is that we have to decide that we're not going to get into the whole debate about whether Christian high school students or Christian teenagers should be dancing. I know there are some denominations, Christian denominations, that say no, kids should not be dancing with one another, especially slow dancing. And then other Christian churches say they can dance, even slow dance, if it's done appropriately and it's not done in any inappropriate way. And so they leave that to the individual conscience of the family members, the parents, and the teen. And if the parents want to forbid their teen to go to a dance, that's okay. If the parents want to allow their teen to go to a dance, that's okay. But with the stipulation that any form of dancing that takes place involving that Christian teen would have to meet the qualifications of a wholesome, friendly, godly activity, not anything that would be degrading, would be overly sexual, would be have any kind of uncleanliness involved. Again, there are some Christian churches and denominations and Christian families and Christian teens who say all forms of dancing would fit the inappropriate category. Although, when I was in high school, there were students down the street, in fact, from where I lived, big family, that did not participate in any form of dancing, even square dancing. Now, even most of the Christian sects and denominations and churches that don't allow for dancing, they usually do allow for what is called square dancing. And that's more or less a mild form of dancing that pretty much everyone realizes is pretty wholesome, family-friendly, clean, godly, and so on and so forth. So that kind of dancing is normally okay, but there are some Christian churches and especially Christian parents and teenagers who do not even, allow for that. But let's assume that you are a Christian who is open to the possibility of some form of dancing that is appropriate form of dancing, and is not in any way dirty or sexually suggestive or anything like that. Now, the issue with the prom is something beyond the whole dancing issue. Because the prom today has become more than just the event that it used to be in the older days. When I went to school, there was the prom, and the kids would get together and they would decorate the gymnasium, and they would hire the DJ to play the music, or the live band if you wanted to really get fancy, the live band. We saw this portrayed in some of the Back to the Future movies where Marty McFly would go back into the future and he had to make sure that his parents met at the prom dance there for their class dance. And so that kind of atmosphere. We also saw it in the movie, for example, It's a Wonderful Life. Jimmy Stewart goes back to the school and he's dancing with this girl that he used to like, and they get back together, but they fall into the swimming pool that just happens to be underneath the dance floor that opens up because of a prank a student was pulling on the dancers. Well, anyway, so dances at high schools and proms are standard fare in the United States. They have been for years and decades, and probably most of the past 50 to almost 100 years in the United States. But of recently, in the last decade or two, maybe in the last just 10 years, proms have become very corrupted. And it's no longer just a fun event where teenagers get together and have fun, last social event of the year. Now, there are things happening like teenagers are spending thousands of dollars for their either dress or their tux. Girls are spending thousands of dollars on the dress and all the wardrobe accessories that go into this, as if it were a wedding. And really, that article that I had read before is really apropos. A lot of kids in our society today, because divorce and remarriage and marriage is so prevalent, and not marrying is so prevalent, living together, shacking up as it used to be called, living in sin, is so prevalent, couples just move in together, that the marriage ceremony actually is either delayed or non-existent in a lot of these young people's lives. So the prom is the main social event of their lifetime. Sad, tragic. So what has happened is the wardrobe, and sometimes the guys will rent a limousine. Really, I kid you not. Guys will rent a limousine to pick up their prom date. Way over the top. Way over the top. This is kind of like wedding activity. This is kind of like wedding reception activity. This is kind of like the big ceremonies of life. Now the prom is becoming one of those big ceremonies of life. It's becoming big and complex and expensive, and it's causing a lot of stress in a lot of the teens because they can't afford this. If you're from the, quote, inner city, like this article was talking about, you can't afford to pay a couple $100 for a limousine rental for the night, for that evening, to pick up your prom date and to drop her off. You can't afford that. And yet they do it. And the parents go into debt, and the parents just encourage it. It's incredibly insane. And I would like to just say to you parents, don't spend a fortune on your child's prom wardrobe and accessories and everything else. Don't spend it. It's not the wedding day. It's not anywhere near as important as a wedding day. And don't see it as a substitute ceremony for the wedding. Wait for the wedding and then spend a moderate amount. But again, there's a whole video that I could do on the wedding industry that has gone over the top. Again, so much so that there are couples now that say, a lot of couples that will say, well, we can't afford to get married while they live together. So in other words, it's a financial thing that they can't exchange rings and have vows and make promises that will last a lifetime. It's a financial thing, and that should never, ever be the case in the case of a wedding. But I digress. Let's get back to the prom history here. Now, in the older days, there used to be a dance at the school, and the kids would help dress up, and they would fix the gymnasium up and put ribbons and bunting, and all this stuff, and there would be chaperones, and the teachers would be there, and sometimes parents would accompany and be adult parent chaperones, and it was all very controlled. It was all very wholesome, good, family-friendly. Boom. Evening over, and the kids went home, the parents went home, the teachers went home, and everything was great. Happily ever after. Well, today it's not that way. What happens today, oftentimes, is that the guy has to rent a limousine, and not only that, the teenagers have booked a hotel room. Yes, that's right, a hotel room. And after the prom dance at the school, sponsored by the school, a chaperone with adults and teachers and parents, the teenagers, the girls and boys, boyfriends and girlfriends, prom dates, will get into the limo and they will go to the hotel room. And they will bring alcohol. And sometimes they will bring drugs, and they will have a party all night long, where then at the end of their partying, they will go to bed together. The prom dates, some of them will engage in fornication and sex outside of marriage and commit lewd and sinful acts. And this all happens with, today, the parents' knowledge. But the parents kind of like turn their back and say, okay, well, we're not going to make a big deal about that. The kids are just having fun. That is not just having fun, people. That is going into the sinful and wicked and evil. And it's because this prom night has become something way overblown. We need to get back to the simple dance that occurs at the end of the school year, the final social event for seniors. We need to get back to that. So if you're a parent and you have a teenager and all of these other things are expected, and it just seems like it goes bigger and bigger all the time as the years roll by, you have to sit down with your teenager and say, look, you're not going to spend a fortune on clothes. You're not going to rent a limousine. This isn't a wedding ceremony. This is a prom. It's a dance. It's a school. It's a final social event, and that's it. And we're not going to distort it and twist it and make it into something else. And then also, we're not going to use it as an occasion to sin. And if I were a parent, I would never send my teenagers unaccompanied, unchaperoned out to a hotel room to spend the night with their friends partying. That's a terrible thing. That is not wholesome. That is not family friendly. That is not godly. That is a recipe for disaster. In fact, I talked to someone from the, quote, inner city who said that he got his girlfriend pregnant on prom night. And it was a disaster, he said. It was a bad thing. Bad thing that happened. Well, that's what happens when unchaperoned teenagers go to a hotel alone, unchaperoned, and party and spend the night together. That's what happens. And it's happening under the eyes of the adults at the school, and it's happening within the full knowledge of the parents, and yet this is somehow acceptable in the sight of these adults. Well, I need to step up and say, look, adults, let's be adults. You need to take control of those teenagers and say, look, you're not going to the hotel room with your prom date. You're not going to spend all night drinking and partying. And you're not going to stay the night with mixed company, boys and girls. You're not going to do it. It's not going to happen. This is not your wedding day, and you're not going on your honeymoon. Keep things in perspective. And the adults need to step into the teenager's life, even at this point, even as they're maturing, and say, look, this is appropriate, but this is not appropriate. A prom dance is appropriate, as long as the dancing is appropriate. Again, you have to be there to help guide these young people into the right path, or else they will go off the wrong path. And I think it's just a failure of leadership at the school. It's a failure of leadership in the parenting. But again, it makes all the sense in the world because of our permissive, immoral, secular, humanistic culture slowly losing any semblance of Christianity, biblical faith. And so everything is difficult these days. But if I were a teenager, if I were a Christian teen, I would simply say, I'm going to the prom dance. I'm taking a date. I will pick the girl up in my car. This has happened thousands and millions of times over the years, and it can happen again today. And you go to the door, you talk to the parents, so the parents see who is taking their daughter to the prom, and then you go to the prom, and then at the end of the prom dance, you drive your date back home, drop her off at the door, you get back in the car, and you go home, and that's the end of the date. There's none of this going to a hotel room with your date and carrying on like pagan, immoral, evil, sinful people. You don't do that. And that's totally inappropriate. So parents, you need to, and if you need permission to do this, I'm giving it to you. Stand up to your teen and say, look, it doesn't matter what everybody's doing. It doesn't matter what the culture's doing. It doesn't matter what they're doing on TV. It doesn't matter what they're doing in the movies. It doesn't matter what you're reading on the internet. You need to say to your teen, we don't do things that way, even if everybody else is doing it. And we need to bring some sanity into this prom scene that is taking place these days. I mean, this kind of video should never even have to be made. There shouldn't have to be this discussion, but because we live in such a corrupt age, this kind of stuff takes place, and Christian parents and families and teenagers need to grapple with it and not just go along with the flow. We need to say, yeah, prom, fine. After prom activities, no, not so fine. Unless it's a group, they go to a restaurant, they go for dinner before the prom, or different things, acceptable things, but not this hotel room. That is totally unacceptable, and that has to be stated very clearly. So I hope this has helped you, especially all of you with teenage sons and daughters, and we'll see you back next time on another edition of Christian Answers. God bless.